My husband cheated on me with my sister. When I got divorced, I found another partner while planning my wedding. I didn't want to invite my sister, but my parents said if she didn't come, neither would they. I have no idea where to begin with this. It still feels surreal. I, 27, have been with my boyfriend Lucas, 29, for nearly 3 years. We had a perfect life planned out, get married next summer and buy a home together. Perhaps even start a family. He's the person I thought I'd spend my life with. But that was before I learned about the worst betrayal I'd ever witnessed. What is the worst part? Lucas was not the only person who betrayed me. It was Emma, my 25-year-old sister. Emma and I were always close. Growing up, we were inseparable. She is only 2 years younger than me, and our parents always mentioned how fortunate they were to have daughters who got along so well. When Lucas and I first began dating, she was overjoyed. She said things like, "He's so perfect for you, and I can see you two staying together forever." It seems like such a cruel joke now. Let me back up a little. A few months ago, I began to notice things about Lucas that did not sit well with me. He became distant and distracted, constantly checking his phone. When I asked who he was texting, he dismissed me with a vague response. Just work, or nothing is important. I didn't push it because I believed him. I trusted him. But then I started feeling crazy. There were small, subtle signs. We were out to dinner one night when Lucas got up to answer a phone call. He left for about 10 minutes, and when he returned, he appeared tense. When I asked if everything was okay, he smiled and said it was just that work was stressful. I wanted to believe him, and I did. But the nagging feeling would not go away. Then things started to disappear. Small things, his favorite jacket, his cologne, his cell phone charger. At first, I assumed he was simply leaving them at work or in his car, but when I asked, he became defensive. "Why are you keeping track of me?" he would snap. Being so irritable was unusual for him. Meanwhile, Emma had been present far more than usual. She dropped by my apartment without warning or invited me out to drinks, which was unusual for her. Don't get me wrong, we've always been close, but she's the type who prefers her privacy, so her sudden eagerness to hang out felt odd. Still, I didn't think much of it because, well, she is my sister. Then one night, everything came crashing down. Lucas had gone out with a few co-workers. At least, that is what he told me. I decided to invite Emma over for movie night. It was something we hadn't done in a long time, and I figured it would help me forget about Lucas's strange behavior. We ordered pizza, opened a bottle of wine, and settled in to watch a cheesy romantic comedy. Emma got up during the movie to use the restroom. Her phone was on the coffee table, and I didn't intend to snoop, but a message appeared on the screen. It was from Lucas. My heart skipped a beat, but I reminded myself that it was probably nothing. Maybe they had something planned for me, like a surprise or something. But curiosity got the best of me, so I opened the message. It was not a surprise. It was a nightmare. The message reads, "I cannot wait to see you later. Last night was amazing. I'll think of an excuse to leave here soon." I just sat there staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. This couldn't be true, right? There was no way. Luke and Emma? No, there had to be a misunderstanding. But when I scrolled up, the truth was clear. They exchanged messages for several months. Flirty, intimate, and secretive messages. They had been seeing each other behind my back for 6 months. 6 fucking months. I felt like I was about to throw up. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the phone. When Emma returned to the room, she noticed the look on my face and knew something was wrong. "What's happening?" she asked, pretending innocence. I did not even say anything. I just held up her phone and showed her the screen. Her face turned pale. "Shit," she whispered. That is all she could say. Shit. I couldn't keep it in any longer. "How could you do this to me?" I screamed. "You're my sister. How could you sleep with my boyfriend?" My voice cracked, and tears rolled down my cheeks. The betrayal felt like a physical pain in my chest. Emma began to cry, but her tears only made me angrier. "I did not intend for this to happen," she sobbed. It's just happened." That phrase made me want to slap her. It's just happened. As if they had tripped and fallen into bed together by chance. I couldn't believe what I heard. "How long?" I demanded. "How long has it been going on?" She hesitated for a moment before whispering, 6 months? 6 months. For half a year, I had been blissfully unaware of what my sister and boyfriend were doing behind my back. The realization hit me like a truck, and my knees buckled. I sat on the couch, numb and barely able to breathe. Emma sat down beside me, still crying. I'm very sorry. She apologized repeatedly, but it was ineffective. They did not undo anything she had done. Nothing could come out, I whispered. She looked at me puzzled. What? Get out, I repeated. This time it was louder. Please let me explain, she begged. I do not want to hear it. I spoke, my voice trembling with rage. Simply get out of my apartment. She tried to persuade me one last time, but I was done. I lacked the strength to argue. I just wanted her gone. Eventually, she grabbed her belongings and left. I burst into tears as the door closed behind her. I sobbed more than I ever had in my life. How does this happen? How could the two people I trusted most in the world betray me in this way? I did not sleep that night. I just sat on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, replaying every moment of my relationship with Lucas and friendship with Emma, trying to figure out how I missed the signs. But the more I reflected on it, the clearer it became. There were signs that I had not wanted to see. The following day, I confronted Lucas. When he arrived home, I sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed, waiting for him. He seemed surprised to see me, probably because I was supposed to be working. Hey, he said, trying to be casual. Why aren't you in the office? I did not waste any time. How long have you slept with Emma? His expression changed from confused to shocked in an instant. He did not even attempt to deny it. I interrupted him before he could finish. Do not just tell me how long. He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck while looking down at the floor. He admitted that it had been 6 months. I felt another wave of nausea wash over me. Hearing it from him made it seem even more real, more painful. Why? I asked. My voice barely rose above a whisper. Why are you doing this to me? He did not have a good response. He mumbled something about how complicated things had become between us. He did not mean to hurt me, but none of that mattered. The damage was done. I told him to pack his belongings and leave. There was no way I was going to stay with someone who could betray me like that. He tried to apologize and say he still loved me, but I didn't care. His words were empty. Within an hour, he was gone. When I read those messages on Emma's phone, I thought the worst part of my life was behind me. But I was mistaken. The hardest part came when I had to confront them. Both my sister and my boyfriend. Two people I thought would never harm me in a million years. Two people who not only hurt, but also betrayed me in the worst possible way. After learning about the affair, I spent the night alone. I did not cry much after Emma left. I was too shocked to cry. My thoughts were racing, trying to figure out what to do next. I couldn't keep this to myself indefinitely. I needed to confront both of them. It wasn't enough to observe their private conversations. I needed to hear it from them in person. The following morning, I made up my mind. I was planning to confront Lucas first. Lucas had spent the night at a hotel after I kicked him out, but we had not spoken since. I texted him that morning, saying I wanted to meet. He must have known what was coming because he responded quickly and agreed to come over. Part of me hoped he'd have an explanation, something to make this all less horrible. I knew better. He arrived around noon, looking disheveled, as if he had not slept. The sight of him made my stomach turn. How could I have loved this man? How could he stand in front of me, knowing what he had done, and not feel ashamed? I'm here, he said awkwardly, standing by the doorway with his hands in his pockets. He wasn't wearing his usual calm, collected expression. Instead, he appeared anxious, as if he were the victim in all of this. Sit down, I said, pointing to the couch. My voice remained steady, but my heart raced. Lucas sat down, keeping his gaze fixed on the floor. The room was silent. The tension between us is almost unbearable. I couldn't stand looking at him, so I forced myself to speak. How long? I asked, breaking the silence. He hesitated and then mumbled, 6 months, 6 months. The same response Emma gave me. The confirmation felt like a knife in my chest, but I knew I had to keep going. I needed the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. And why? I inquired, my voice trembling. Why her? Why my sister? Lucas finally looked up at me, and I thought I saw a hint of regret in his eyes, but it didn't matter. Nothing he said could change this. I don't know, he said, his voice low. It's just happened. We didn't intend for it to. It was never supposed to get this far. I laughed bitterly. It's just happened. Is that all you have? You've been sneaking around with my sister for 6 months, and all you have to say is that it just happened. He rubbed the back of his neck, obviously uncomfortable. I realize it sounds terrible, but it's the truth. We did not plan this one night. I do not know. One thing led to another. Please spare me the details. I interrupted him, feeling sick to my stomach. I don't need to know how you got into bed with my sister. I just want to know why you thought it was okay to lie to me, to betray me like this. Lucas looked down again, his face filled with guilt. I apologize, he whispered. I never intended to hurt you. I felt a rush of rage rise in my chest. His apology felt empty and meaningless. How could he stand there and apologize after lying to me for half a year? You never wanted to hurt me, I repeated, my tone rising. You thought this wouldn't hurt me? Do you think sleeping with my sister behind my back wasn't the worst thing you could have done? I know it was wrong, he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. However, things were complicated between us. You were always so busy with work, and we weren't connecting as much as we used to. And Emma doesn't, I snapped. Don't try to blame it on me. I did not push you into her arms. You decided to do this. You decided to betray me. Lucas opened his mouth to reply, but I raised my hand to stop him. I couldn't take any more excuses. I didn't care why he did it anymore. The damage was done. You should leave, I replied quietly, my voice shaking with emotion. I do not ever want to see you again. He did not argue. He slowly stood up, his head hanging low, and approached the door. But before leaving, he turned to look at me one last time. I'm truly sorry, he said softly. But his apology meant nothing to me. When the door finally closed behind him, I felt numb. I collapsed on the couch, my body shaking with sobs. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Lucas was gone, as was my relationship with him. The life we had planned, the future I had imagined, vanished in an instant. But the worst wasn't yet over. I still needed to confront Emma. The thought of confronting her made my stomach turn. I wasn't sure how I'd do it, but I knew I had to. I could not let her get away with it. She had betrayed me as much as Lucas had. She was my sister, the one person who was supposed to have my back in any situation. She stabbed me in the back instead. I decided to confront her the same day. I could not put it off any longer. I texted her and told her I needed to talk. She didn't respond right away, but after about an hour, she did text back. I apologize that one text made me want to scream. Sorry. That was all she could say after everything. She did not even have the decency to explain herself. I drove to her apartment in a daze, unable to see through the tears in my eyes. When I arrived, I didn't even knock. I just walked in. She sat on the couch. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. I despised seeing her at that moment. My own sister, whom I had trusted with everything, had ruined my life. We need to talk, I replied coldly. Emma nodded. Her face was pale. I understand. I stood in front of her, arms crossed, attempting to hold back the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. Why? I demanded. My voice shook. Why would you do this to me? She stared at her hands, unable to look me in the eyes. I do not know, she whispered. Bullshit, I snapped. There is no way you don't know. You made a decision, Emma. You decided to sleep with my boyfriend. You decided to lie to me for 6 months, so don't tell me you're not sure why. She eventually looked up at me. Tears were streaming down her face. I did not mean to hurt you, she sobbed. I swear, I never wanted this to happen. So why did it? I shouted. My voice echoed throughout the apartment. If you didn't intend to hurt me, why did you do so? Why didn't you stop it? She shook her head and wiped away the tears. I do not know. Lucas and I came close, and it just happened. I know it's terrible and I've ruined everything, but I didn't intend for it to get this far. I couldn't believe what I heard. It was the same excuse Lucas had given me, the same pathetic reason for their betrayal. You did not intend for it to go this far, I repeated bitterly. That is the best you have. You were screwing my boyfriend behind my back. Emma, you can't act like this was an accident. She sobbed harder, but I had no sympathy for her. I was too angry and hurt to care about her tears. I trusted you. I spoke softly, my voice trembling. You are my sister. You were supposed to have my back, but you stabbed me in it. I'm very sorry, she whispered. Her voice is barely audible. I know I destroyed everything. I despise myself for what I have done. Good, I replied coldly. You should. We both sat there, and the room fell silent for a moment. The significance of what had occurred, hanging in the air. I wasn't sure what to do next. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to make her feel as much pain as I did. But another part of me wanted to leave and never speak with her again. Do you love him? I asked abruptly, the question slipping out before I could control it. Emma looked up at me, startled. What? Do you love him? I repeated Lucas. Do you love him? She hesitated for a moment before shaking her head. No, she whispered. I do not. It was not like that. I wasn't sure whether I believed her, but it didn't matter anymore. Whatever feelings she had for Lucas, it was too late. She had already destroyed our relationship. I can't do it anymore. I said this while standing up. I can't be around you. I do not want to see you. I do not want to talk to you. You are not my sister anymore. Emma sobbed harder, but I turned away and walked out the door. I could not stay any longer. I needed to get away from her, from everything. As I drove home, the gravity of what had occurred began to sink in. My relationship with Lucas was over. My relationship with Emma was shattered. Everything I knew and had trusted was gone. I was totally alone. After the confrontation with Emma and Lucas, I thought I was done being surprised. Nothing could have hurt me more than hearing the two people I cared the most about confess to the worst betrayal of my life. But there was one more unexpected blow. Perhaps I should betray my own parents. I drove to their house the day after my altercation with Emma, still raw with emotion. I had not slept at all the night before. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying what had happened over and over. I tried to figure out how my own sister could do this to me, but nothing made sense. There was no excuse that would make things right. When the morning light finally broke through the window, I had made up my mind. I needed to inform my parents. I needed them to understand what Emma had done. I needed their support, outrage, and comfort. Emma had betrayed me, and Lucas had left my life. But my parents were . They were supposed to be the people I could count on. I called them as soon as I got out of bed to see if I could come over. They sounded cheerful on the phone, completely unaware of the impending storm. Of course, sweetie. Come by whenever you want. My mother told me that I could hear her humming in the background. Probably in the middle of making breakfast for my father. They had a normal day, but nothing was normal for me anymore. The drive to their house seemed surreal. I kept mentally practicing what I was going to say. How would you even start a conversation like that? Hello, Mom and Dad? Guess what? Emma has been screwing my boyfriend for 6 months. There was no easy way to deliver this type of news. When I finally drove into their driveway, my heart pounded. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, attempting to steady myself. I had no idea what I was expecting, but I was confident that once they learned the truth, they would be furious. They'd be equally devastated as I was. I knocked on the door and my mother answered with a bright smile as if everything was fine in the world. That's my girl, she said, drawing me into a hug. Come in. We were just about to eat breakfast. The smell of pancakes and bacon permeated the house. For a brief moment, I was reminded of how safe and comfortable my parents' home had always been, but that comfort vanished as soon as I realized why I was there. I sat at the kitchen table. My hands shook slightly. My father smiled as he looked up from his newspaper. So look who decided to pay you a visit. Just on time. Want some pancakes? I shake my head. No, I am not hungry. My mother glanced at me, concern in her eyes. You okay, sweetheart? You appear a little pale. This was it. I had to explain that there was no easy way to do it, no way to soften the blow. So I just said it. Emma has had an affair with Lucas. I burst out, my voice breaking. The room became silent. My father slowly set down his newspaper, and my mother froze, her spatula hovering over the stove. "What?" my mother whispered, turning to face me. Her face was full of confusion. I swallowed forcefully, my throat tightening. Emma and Lucas. They have been sleeping together behind my back for 6 months. My father's face paled, and he looked at me as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. My mother, on the other hand, appeared to have just been slapped across the face. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "I found out yesterday." I continued, my voice shaking. I confronted both of them, and they admitted it. "Lucas has gone." I kicked him out. My mother finally found her voice. "Please wait. Are you certain? There must be some sort of misunderstanding." I looked at her, stunned. "A misunderstanding? No, Mom, there is no misunderstanding. I saw the messages. I confronted them. They admitted it." My father was still silent. His expression is unreadable. However, my mother appeared to be struggling to process the information. "Sweetie, I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Here it is. I mean, this is horrible." "What? Are you certain it's what you think? Maybe. Emma made an error. Perhaps it wasn't as serious. "Are you kidding me?" I snapped, feeling a surge of anger. "Not so serious. She has been sleeping with my boyfriend for 6 months. Mom, how much more serious should it be?" My mother flinched at my harsh words, but I didn't care. I was hurt and furious, and I needed them to understand that this was not something that could be dismissed. "Yes, I understand." She replied quickly. "Emma is your sister, and Lucas. So he's gone now, right? Maybe we can all sit down and discuss this. Perhaps there is a way to work through it." I couldn't believe what I heard. I came here expecting them to be on my side and support me. But instead, my mother was already talking about reconciliation. "No, Mom," I replied firmly. "This cannot be worked through. Emma betrayed me. She ruined my relationship, and I'm not sure if I'll ever forgive her for it." My father finally spoke up. His voice was quiet yet steady. "Your mother is right. Emma is your sister, and no matter what she has done, family is family. You can't simply throw that away." I looked at him in disbelief. "Throw it away, Father." "She threw it away when she decided to sleep with Lucas." "How can you sit there and defend her after what she's done to me?" "We aren't defending her," my mother said quickly. "We're just trying to see the big picture. Yes, what she did was incorrect. But she is still your sister. Lucas is now out of the picture. Perhaps with time you can work things out." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I poured my heart out to them, expecting them to be furious on my behalf. Instead, they were already trying to make things right by asking me to forgive and forget. "I cannot believe this." I spoke, my voice trembling with rage. "I came here because I needed your help, but all you care about is maintaining peace with Emma." "That's not true," my father said, frowning. "We care about you. However, we also care about your relationship with your sister. You have always been so close. We do not want to see it ruined. Ruined." I stood up from the table and shouted, "She ruined it by sleeping with my boyfriend. I can't simply pretend it didn't happen." My mother set down the spatula and walked over to me. Her hands extended as if to calm me down. "Sweetheart, please, we're only trying to help. We understand you are hurting, but time heals all wounds. You do not want to cut your sister out of your life because of a mistake." "Is this a mistake?" I repeated, my voice filled with disbelief. "This wasn't just a mistake, Mom. She made this decision repeatedly over the course of 6 months. How can you stand there defending her? We aren't defending what she did." My father spoke, his voice firmer now. "But we won't let this tear our family apart. We have been through too much together." I could feel the rage boiling inside me, threatening to spill over. How could they not see how much this hurt me? How could they care more about maintaining the illusion of family unity than about what Emma had done to me? "I can't do it," I said, shaking my head. "I expected you to understand, but you clearly don't. You are more concerned about Emma than about me." "That is not true," my mother replied quickly. "We are worried about both of you. It doesn't feel like it," I shot back. It appears that your primary concern is ensuring that everything returns to normal as if this never happened. We simply want to see you and Emma reconcile." My father spoke, his tone softening. "We do not want to lose either of you. Maybe you should have considered that before defending her." I spoke bitterly. My mother's face crumpled, and I noticed a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But that wasn't enough. It was not the reaction I was hoping for. I wanted them to be angry, to be on my side, but instead they were skirting the issue, attempting to maintain a false sense of family harmony. I grabbed my purse and went to the door. "Where are you going?" my mother called after me. Her voice was full of worry. "Home," I replied coldly. "I can't be here right now. Please do not go like this," my father said, standing up from the table. "We will figure it out, okay? We'll talk to Emma about how to move forward as a family." I paused at the door, my hand on the doorknob. "There is no going forward, Dad. Not with her. Not after what she has done. There you have it." I walked out and slammed the door behind me. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles whitened. I could not believe what had just occurred. I had gone to my parents for support and comfort, but they had sided with Emma. Maybe they didn't say it directly, but it felt that way. They were more concerned with preserving the family than with supporting me. When I arrived home, I collapsed on the couch, the weight of everything bearing down on me. Lucas came first, followed by Emma and now my parents. It felt as if everyone in my life had abandoned me. I was totally alone. The tears came, hot and fast. And I did not try to stop them. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to cry. I cried over the end of my relationship, the betrayal of my sister, and the realization that even my parents weren't truly on my side. I'd never felt so completely abandoned in my life. Planning a wedding was supposed to be one of the most joyful times in my life. After everything I had gone through with Lucas and Emma, meeting Mark felt like a breath of fresh air. He was unlike anyone I had ever met. Kind, patient, and most importantly, trustworthy. We had been together nearly 2 years when he proposed, and I knew right away that I wanted to marry him. He made me feel safe in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. However, as we began planning the wedding, I realized there was one dark cloud hanging over everything. My sister, Emma. The thought of inviting her to my wedding turned my stomach. Even after all this time, I had yet to forgive her. How could I? She'd ruined my relationship with Lucas. More than that, she had broken my trust in her. There were still times when I wondered if I had done something incorrectly, something that will push Lucas away. Even though I knew that their affair was not my fault. The scars were still there, and I wasn't prepared to face her, let alone have her at my wedding. Mark and I were sitting at the dining table one evening, working on the guest list. It was a fun process at first to decide which friends we wanted to spend the day with, but as we approached the end of the list, I felt a knot form in my stomach. "How about your family?" Mark asked, looking over at me. I hesitated, my pen hovering above the paper. "My parents? Obviously." I spoke slowly, but not Emma. Mark looked up at me with a soft but curious expression. He knew everything that had happened between me, Lucas, and Emma. I told him everything early on in our relationship because I did not want to keep anything from him. He had been very understanding, but we hadn't talked much about Emma since. "Are you certain?" he asked gently. I nodded. "Yeah, I am sure. I am not ready to forgive her, and I do not want her around." Mark reached across the table to take my hand. "I will support whatever decision you make," he said. "It's your family and your wedding. On that particular day, you should feel at ease and happy, not stressed or upset." I smiled at him, thankful for his support. But even as I said the words, I knew it wouldn't be easy. My parents had always put their family first, no matter what. They had pushed me to reconcile with Emma, ever since the affair was revealed. But I wasn't there yet. I wasn't sure if I'd be available the following weekend. I went to my parents' house to talk with them. Despite my reservations, I decided that having this conversation in person was preferable. My parents had been so focused on keeping the family together that I knew they would be upset by my decision. When I arrived, they were sitting in the living room drinking coffee and reading the Sunday paper. It seemed like a normal scene, but my heart was pounding in my chest. I sat across from them and tried to calm my nerves. "I need to talk with you about the wedding." I began with a shaky voice. My mother smiled up at me. "We've been meaning to ask how the planning is going." I took a deep breath. "It's going well, but I have something to tell you. I am not inviting Emma to the wedding." My mother's smile faltered, and my father set down his coffee cup. His expression hardened. They both stared at me in silence for a moment, and I could feel the tension rise in the room. "What do you mean you are not inviting her?" my mother asked. Her voice was filled with disbelief. "I'm not prepared to forgive her," I replied quietly. "I do not want her there. It's supposed to be the most wonderful day of my life, and I don't want to be reminded of everything she did. My father frowned and shook his head. "We're talking about your sister, not a random person. You can't simply cut her out like that." "I'm not cutting her out," I said, raising my voice slightly. "But she betrayed me, Father. She spent 6 months sleeping with Lucas behind my back. How am I supposed to pretend it didn't happen? We've discussed this before," my mother said, her tone firm. "Yes, Emma did something wrong, but it was a long time ago. She is still your sister. And family remains family. You have to let this go." I felt my rage rising inside me. "Let it go," I repeated, my voice trembling. "You want me to invite the person who destroyed my relationship to my wedding? How is that fair to me?" My father leaned forward, his expression stern. "Life is not always fair, but you don't abandon your family. You should forgive Emma and move on." "I cannot." I said this with tears in my eyes. "I am not ready." My mother's side looked at me with disappointment and frustration. "You should consider what is best for the entire family, not just yourself." Her words felt like a slap to the face. Here I was, telling them how much pain Emma had caused me, and all they were concerned about was keeping the family together. I felt like I was screaming into the void. It was as if they would never understand anything I said. "I'm thinking about what's best for me." I spoke, my voice shaking. "I cannot have her at my wedding. I will not." My father crossed his arms, his face becoming darker. "If Emma isn't invited, neither are we." I looked at him stunned. "What? You have heard me?" He spoke coldly. "If you are going to exclude your sister from the wedding, your mother and I will not be there either." I couldn't believe what I heard. My own parents issued me an ultimatum. Either invite the person who had hurt me the most, or they won't attend my wedding. I felt as if the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. "Dad, you cannot be serious." I spoke, my voice breaking. "This is my wedding. Don't you want to be there for me?" "We do. My mom spoke softly. "However, we also want you to do the right thing. We want you to forgive Emma and let her be a part of today. She is your sister, and she loves you." "Loves me?" I laughed bitterly. "If she loved me, she would not have done the things she did. We all make mistakes." My father spoke, his voice firm, "But family comes first." I could feel the tears welling up, but I refused to let them see me break. I stood up. My legs shook beneath me. "If you truly believe Emma deserves to attend my wedding more than you do, then I suppose you've made your decision." "Do not do this," my mother pleaded, her voice softening. "You'll regret it. No comma," I said in my own voice. "Keep it steady now." I believe the only thing I'd regret is allowing you to guilt me into inviting her. With that, I turned to walk out the door. I didn't look back, even when I heard my mother calling after me. I got in my car and drove away. My heart is pounding in my chest. I could not believe what had just occurred. My parents had chosen Emma over me. But as much as it hurt, I knew I'd made the correct decision. The weeks before the wedding were a blur of emotions. On the one hand, I was thrilled to marry Mark. He was my rock throughout it all, reminding me that I didn't need anyone else's approval to be happy. On the other hand, the pain of my parents' ultimatum hovered over me like a dark cloud. I always imagined them being there on my wedding day, walking me down the aisle and sharing in my joy. But now I had to admit that they would not be. As the wedding date approached, I found myself questioning whether I was making the right decision by standing my ground. Is it worth losing my parents for this? But every time I reflected on it, I came to the same conclusion. I wasn't going to be manipulated into inviting Emma. I had to do what was best for myself, even if it meant they wouldn't be present. The wedding day arrived, and as I stood in front of the mirror in my bridal suite, I was filled with mixed emotions. I was nervous, excited, and slightly sad. My parents weren't there to see me in my dress and give me their blessing. But as I looked around at the friends who had gathered to support me, I realized I was not alone. I now had a new family, including Mark and others who genuinely cared about my happiness. The ceremony was beautiful. As I walked down the aisle with my best friend Sarah instead of my father, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. Mark waited for me at the altar. His eyes are filled with love and reassurance, and in that moment, I knew I'd made the right decision. My parents were not present, but I was surrounded by love. I was marrying the man who had supported me during the most difficult period of my life, and that was all that mattered. Following the wedding, Mark and I settled into our new lives together. It was not easy at first. There were times when I missed my parents and wondered if I should have simply given in and invited Emma to avoid losing them, but every time I thought about it, I reminded myself that I'd done what was best for me. I had chosen happiness, and I was not going to let anyone take it away. Mark was my constant source of strength. He never pushed me to reconcile with my parents. Even though I knew he wished things were different, instead, he helped me focus on creating a new life that was not defined by those who had wronged me. I stopped trying to contact my parents after a while. At first, I hoped they'd come around, that they would recognize how much they had hurt me by choosing Emma over me. However, they never did. I eventually stopped waiting for them, too. I now had a new family, Mark and the friends who had stood by me when my own family had failed me. It was not the life I had envisioned. However, it was a good one. And as I progressed, I learned to let go of the pain and accept that not everyone who is supposed to love you will. Sometimes you have to let go of those who have hurt you, even if they are family.